Thank. All right. So, I wouldn't blame anybody that thinks that way because it comes down to perception by the society we all live in. So, to a large extent, it comes with some form of um, stigmatization from people that think that you have mental ill health or you have a poor mental health. To a large extent, we oftentimes confuse mental health for psychiatric conditions, and there's quite a lot of disparity or difference between the two. So because of that mix up, a lot of people think that poor mental health also is exactly the same thing as psychiatric um, conditions and tends to stigmatize people that identify themselves as having those kind of concerns. But it is not so. So because of that, you wouldn't want to look vulnerable to anyone, especially in the workplace, at home, depending on the support system you have or the level of understanding of the people around you. Wouldn't want to look vulnerable to them. So sometimes you try to keep that to yourself. But of course, that's really by itself a negative and a very bad thing to do. Yeah. Well, so so I'm not surprised you're part of the group anyway, but I can easily say this. All right, so no, you're forgiven for thinking that way anyway, but it's not unheard of. But but the thing is, mental ill health generally speaks to um, our response to stress. You know, every day, our daily living, we come across a whole lot of challenges. There are a lot of decisions we make, whether we're at home or at work or wherever we find ourselves. We have this need to make decisions. A lot of decisions are tough decisions, even when you just come at the spur of the moment and expect you to quickly respond and expect, of course, that you make the right decision at that point too. But they those threats they present to you because you are swarmed by a whole lot of these things and can present some form of stress to your mind. So generally, mental health is by itself not a psychiatric condition because someone can temporarily um, have a low mood, but it does not mean that they suffer, they are living with depression. Depression itself is is a psychiatric condition. But low mood that just comes occasionally because of just something you can easily solve and get out of eventually does not mean one is mentally or has a psychiatric condition. Again, someone could be suddenly anxious because of just something that happened recently or just to them at that particular time and they want to get out of it. But they could be there is a clear disparity. Sometimes for a lot of people who probably are not.
Is it
Okay,
me
sorry,
or?
can you?
Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I had a bit of an interruption in my network.
Okay.
Oh, so I don't know whether the last thing you heard me say, but I was trying to tell you a few of the difference between psychiatric and psychiatric conditions that are clear-cut mental ill health. In the sense you generally understand, but the milder form of it, which is what a lot of people live with, and does not necessarily mean that they have mental ill health, is what I earlier described. So I was saying that someone could have low mood because of some um, probably it's just something that got them unhappy or something. It does not mean they are living with a depression. And like I said earlier, depression is a psychiatric condition. But having a low mood just temporarily, which does not repeat, when I mean temporarily, it may just be less than a day or just about that. They they generally speak to the fact that this is just a mental ill health. But of course, there are stimulus for these things. So it's if the mental ill health, the stimulus itself does not get solved, it can affect how long it stays with the individual too. But there's quite a lot of difference with it. Mm, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so there are pointers to mental health, mental ill health actually. So there are things that put people at risk to developing poor mental health, and of course can affect their coping mechanism as well too. So generally, okay, go ahead. Yes, yes, we can. But before I quickly go in there, I just want to mention a little thing because I believe that we have quite some managers around here, and I want to mention that it's important that we know that it's actually a very common thing among entrepreneurs. About 70% of persons have of entrepreneurs have been identified. We know a random study to have that. So it's important to know that if you find it around yourself, you don't feel strange about it. Now, but generally on the clinical side, purely clinical now, the predisposing factors or risk factors, things that put people at risk of developing a mental illness can be generally and broadly classified into two. There may be the genetic part of it, which would speak to family history of mental ill health. Of course, as much as we have a difference between mental, i- poor mental health and psychiatric conditions. If the poor mental health is not properly managed and it stays over time, it can eventually become clear-cut psychiatric conditions, especially when there are genetic susceptibilities to that. So for individuals that already have family histories of of psychiatric conditions, particular types, things like anxiety disorders, depression, attention deficit disorders, even schizophrenia. Some of them could come down with some of those concerns. But that's just one group of it, genetics. The next is environmental. These are the things that tend to serve as stimulus to developing mental poor mental health. Now, they could range from childhood to adulthood problems. So for childhood, you would generally expect that a child raised in a dysfunctional family would have some form of um, instability in their mental status. So they are likely to have to be obsessively compulsive. Some of them are likely to be depressed, and so those kind of things can happen. And it may be a temporary thing again, but there are also people that go through challenges like bullying at school, peer pressures, or substance abuse at an early age, or even sexual abuse too, are also at risk of these things at childhood. Then family concerns for an adult now, things like divorce or even a loss of a loved one, even dysfunctional family, poverty can all um, serve as stimulus to or risk factors to poor mental health. There's also this poor life work balance. We we understand the economy quite is not easy on people these days, and because of that, we tend to put in a whole lot of time into getting the job done, working very hard to make sure we are not affected if the company decides to retrench. Because I just recently learned that the major bank is already major bank in Nigeria is already looking at um, uh, downsizing, and a lot of persons are going to be affected by this. So the persons going to be retained would have this fear in them, that fear of the unknown, to want to work hard so that if the company decides to go on a second level downsizing too, which oftentimes happens, they will not be affected. And that takes them away from family, it takes them away from social life, takes them away from many things. Now, again, depending on where you live, for instance, if you live in Lagos, like I do, you'll see, and then you commute long distances from home to work and back. The length of time you spend on the road alone will tell you to and fro work will tell you that you barely have time for yourself. Sometimes you spend up to 6 hours to and fro work just to commute for to work and back home. And that reduces the length of time you spend with family members. And if it continues to happen that way, they too will start having burnout about your absences. So, and sometimes it raises concerns and problems where they don't have proper understanding of what you do and the level of support you need to keep pushing on. Probably yourself, you even don't even understand how to properly balance things and make sure you're also available and there for your family. So some of these things are predisposing factors. There's also the career and work related challenges, and some people with certain forms of ill health, ill health, chronic medical conditions, or sudden life changing traumatic conditions like road traffic accidents that led to amputation, merely knowing that you're going to lose your leg, you use it for more than 40, 50 years, and then suddenly you're losing that leg. Readjustment becomes a concern. There is a whole lot of emotional twist around it that make it difficult for people to fully come back to what function optimally. So some of these things are predisposing factors, things that put people at risk. Now, these are general anyway, but there are a few of them for startups. Maybe when you ask about, I'll talk about it more. Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, okay. So look at it this way. Interestingly, there's a study that tried to classify entrepreneurs into buckets of mental conditions, or they are much more likely to be identified with. So, attention deficit disorder and bipolar disorder were mentioned. And I'll just tell a bit about attention deficit disorder. So, people with ADD brain usually restless. They are very inquisitive, sometimes visionary, and often relentless. So they are definitely impulsive, just like their counterparts, the ones with bipolar disorders too. So for the ones, they have they have the ones you will not naturally. These are the people you meet every day, but some of these characteristics don't even let you know. They have high performance, so they won't even let you know that these are this is actually what they don't even know about it themselves too. But it's one thing that also drives performance for them. So for the bipolar ones, they're quite creative. They have a lot of energy and contagious of inspiration. So these people can talk you into anything and convince and sell just nothing to you and you buy at a very high rate and high cost and are quite very impulsive too. So, but generally, um, as much as it has its upside, it also has its downside. So the more compulsive you are, that's impulsive rather you are, the more you do little work on uh, um, reviewing your activities or initiatives before jumping into them. So sometimes affect the quality of the decision some of these persons also make. That can affect business eventually. So sometimes in the long term, it doesn't really give the level of success they expect, and they start getting um, worried about overall performance of their businesses too. In general, that's just about ADD and bipolar um, personalities. Yes, I was going to say that. Thanks for asking that. Um, I would like to say this, though it may come a little surprising to some of us too. The We've noticed there has been quite a significant, a rising number of suicide by entrepreneurs generally, and of course affects on startups um, to a large extent too. But although we don't have data around this, we found out that these concerns, the concerns around their the suicidal concerns or problems, are not really related to depression as we will expect. Some of them may not be related to suicidal ideation, but it was noted that they have this feeling of being trapped in the sense that you have initiatives you've set up, you expect, you've invested so much in, or in it's probably an invention or innovation you've invested a whole lot of time, resources into, and you have a huge expectation on what the outcome should be. But at some point, you appear to get stuck. You don't know, things are not working the way you expected them. If you had drawn your graph, you would not expect anything to to serve as an impedance anyway, to block your way, to stop you from progressing at some point, because you think you've gotten everything well covered. So that feeling of being trapped, lost at sea, no sense of direction because you don't even understand the problem is usually why a lot of startups, um, startup entrepreneurs either lose the business or uh, experience that stall or even consider suicide. Some of those things are some of the reasons those things happen. But again, the fact is that being stuck is not really the problem. It's actually how you handle it. So it brings us to coping mechanism. And then the sense of uh, finding out how to resolve and solve those problems should be a major thing that should be primary to the individual. That, of course, I will advise generally that you first anticipate these things because they can happen. And before we go to that, now, if they already happened, how do you get out of some of these things in the first place? It has to require a systematic approach. You can't just expect the problem to get solved out of the blues or fold your hands and expect it to be solved. It will require action, and the action has to be properly metered toward the problem. And now, but one of some of the reasons people get stuck in the first place is the fact that probably their product or services are not meeting strong enough need. The quality of their product is not good enough out there for consumers. Now the pricing probably may be too high or too low, and they don't know how to go about this. Now the target market also does not know about their business, so you have set up all of these things, and of course you expect that somebody will come to patronize you, but eventually the people you expect to patronize you are not even aware you exist in the first place. It means you can make sales. That's going to be a huge revenue problem. Then you don't have the right numbers in your team to improve any of the things I have mentioned earlier, or the short of funds or the skills for yourself and probably your team is lacking from what you think, or if you have done a proper study about that. But how do you now start going about this really in the first place? Is probably the next question we should start thinking of. But generally, it requires proactive action because you can't just expect that you do nothing and then it gets solved. Usually, so if these are a few of the things. Now, I'm not a specialist in this, but I believe that we have a number of specialists here too, the likes of Adeolu. So Adeolu to help mention a few areas based on my experience. But again, these are what I know that are some of, yeah, Adele, want to say something, I guess?
Yes, and not
Okay.
to really add, but actually more to probe further, because I find
Okay.
it really interesting. We assume that, or at least I had assumed, when we see these suicides, when we see these things happen, that the person was depressed, and it all of a sudden it just got too much, and they decided to end it. But you're saying more that it's a feeling of being stuck, and I
Yes.
think for me that becomes a bit tougher as to then how can we best help those around us? How can we see those signs? Like, what are the signs? What are the things we should look out for? And then what's the best way we can help?
All right. So, um, first, if you are stuck, people may not know you're stuck, except you tell people that you're stuck. So it means one of the first things to do is to identify the fact that you are stuck, and then seek help because people may not be good at reading your mood, reading your actions, and all of that. You may just think that you have not made a decision of what to do about whatever the problem is, and they're just waiting for you to make a decision, or you even forgot in the first place without knowing you're really truly stuck. So it's important to um, open up to someone with the right skills. The person may be within your team, or the other person may actually be outside your team entirely. So in that case, you may require an advisor to help um, provide solution to some of those concerns. But again, one of the things you can do also is to approach this thing through simple analytics. It is whatever is stalling your activities or getting you stuck are not um, they're not cast in stone. They're not eh, far-fetched. They're not difficult to find. So the fact is, if you take some time to think about it or get a team to review it. For instance, if it's something about sales, you notice that your sales are dropping very well and the numbers keep dropping significantly. It's important to push in a lot of resources there to identify why it is dropping. It may be that the consumers, their taste probably has changed and you didn't know, you don't want tracking and it suddenly happened. For instance, Nokia didn't know that the taste of uh, phone users had moved from what they had to a different version, and people now had different preference because it gave them more, looked much more for many reasons. Had better functionality, better presentation, so many things there. But because they were not tracking, they were very comfortable where they were. They didn't know that the market was already changing. So that affected them significantly, and it can affect any business too. So it's important that you take some time to identify what has changed. what could have been affecting your businesses. Commit resources to it. Do in-depth analysis. Don't get anything painted because, of course, your business depends on it. So make sure you're getting the right information and define an approach that would solve it, not just only for the short term. Also think of sustainability to make sure that it also serves the long term. I hope this attended to your question.
Yes, it did. Uh,
Okay.
and I think it's still not easy, right? And one of
Oh
the
no.
sad statistics you hear is the number of, well, the increasing number of men who are, professional, well off, well educated, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems like everything is going well for them, and until it's not, and all of a sudden they're gone.
Yeah.
And to your point, you said about opening up. So perhaps for us women, it's easier for us to open up, right? As opposed
Yeah.
to the societal expectations of men.
Yeah.
So what I've done is, when these things happen, I'll reach out randomly to some of the guys in my network, saying, are you okay? Is there anything you want to talk about? But that's
Okay.
very that's not very intentional, right? So I'm still struggling to find like a more systematic way to just make sure that our people are okay. And how do we do that?
Right. So now I understand now from the perspective of someone trying to help now, and especially when the other person that has the problem has not said anything to you. To a large extent, people open up when first when they trust they can open up to you and you have the solution to their problems and the information they share with you is safe. Of course, it depends also on the industry. If you are a competitor and the other person has a challenge, they're not likely to open up to you because you are a competitor, so they wouldn't want to talk about their concerns. You may um, use that against them in prioritizing your own activities to make sure that you surpass them in the sales. But if all other things being equal, I believe you may need to, and probably you were able to identify that there are problems with the company. Maybe you have probably noticed that there's something about your product that's not what I used to know. So in that case, you are going to be approaching that concern or your concern with more direct question because when you ask general questions, you get general responses too. But if you ask more direct questions, you're likely to get more direct answers. It may not answer the first response you get may not um, give you all the information you want, but it may give you clues to drive further, to dig further, and find out what the problem is. But again, it's also important that when you ask those things, you have to properly make sure that the person you're asking those questions understand that you're there to help and willing to help, and that it is just about help. If they don't trust all of these things, they will find it difficult to open up, no matter how much you drive or you push. I don't know what you understood me. I do. Hello.
Yes, I think that
Okay,
very,
so
very
you have to be a
helpful.
little,
Hmm.
yeah, you have to be a little more specific to be able to get the information you want. Otherwise, you're not likely to get that from them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks. That's a nice question. I wasn't expecting it, but it's good you asked it. Sometimes we do not know the impact of our activities or the words we speak, the emails we write, or the things we say, or even our actions that read a lot of meaning um, towards our team members that affect their performance. So it's quite important that um, we as bosses understand that um, an open door policy, though this is quite a little vague for a lot of people. When you say open door policy, you think that it's just to make yourself approachable to ask you questions and all of that. It also means that as a boss, you should be able to take criticisms without responding aggressively, even when the person is your team member or you consider them a downliner. Take criticism without throwing back because you felt your ego was hit or something. So because you the same validation you want is also the same validation another person wants. So sometimes I think that depending on what it is, one-on-one engagement helps solve a lot of problems to a large extent. So if you have challenging situations with your team, it's important you identify the source of the problems and have one-on-one engagement with them, something that doesn't sound vindictive. It's something that gives them confidence that you're there to work out things with them, to move forward from there, and not to identify faults and use it against them. I don't know whether I'm on track with your response again, just in case you think I'm moving out of it, you can still bring me back to the exact thing you want. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Good.
All right. Thank you so much, firstly, for organizing this gathering. And then also, I want to appreciate the facilitator who is doing wonderfully well on these issues. So, straight ahead, my question is regarding how a boss or a CEO, a top executive officer of a startup, responds to criticisms when actually it's not fully the fault is not fully coming from the top boss. Let me use that word, the person at the top, and maybe your subordinate or your colleagues that are trying to impose it on you because you are the CEO. How do you handle that particular issue? Because it's peculiar, whereby you pass out a task for people to go ahead and execute, and they don't do it properly. At the end of the day, it falls back on you, and some other people are trying to put the blame on you. How do you manage the reaction? Because as a human being, it has a way of getting at you. So I don't know if you understand the question. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, Anya. I heard you. Can you hear me too? Just confirm you can hear me. I just want to be sure your network is stable and you can hear me.
I can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much. So, if I understood you, you wanted to know what you would do as the chief executive of a company, a startup, where you've identified some concerns and your team members think that it was your fault that probably things started going south, going the way you didn't expect. So, but of course, you still want to resolve that because if you don't resolve it, it could cause a lot of problems. It can affect the business. Is that the question you're asking? Hello, Anya? Okay, so maybe case is you can't hear me. All right. So yes, yes. exactly. So now, what I believe you should do is, what I
Can
believe
you
you
hear
should
me?
do is that you
Okay,
ask
okay, go
the
ahead,
chief
go ahead.
executive of the company. So, yes, I can hear you, Anya. All right. So, Anya, you are the chief executive of the company. So, throwing blames is not going to solve any problem. That's a fact. Identifying who is at fault so that you make sure that they know they're at fault is not going to solve the problem of the company. What you rather need to do is to identify the problem itself. You we don't focus on people, you focus on the problem. You can solve the problem so that whether individuals were there or not, it does not affect your activities. But of course, again, to make sure those problems don't repeat again in case it happened as a result of the laxity of a team member or some team members, you need to also bring in the persons who are supposed to have identified or solved that problem before it became a big problem. Train them on um, how to identify those problems. I like to see those things as training gaps. There may be some other things outside this, but there are still training gaps. They may even just not be about training or lack of some skill sets in helping these people identify those things. It may just be um, pure laxity from the individual. Then, of course, you get the human resource manager to quickly attend that, the administrator to quickly attend to that, reviewed by the standard. There are processes with these things to make sure that the person who is not getting things right is put back on track. It's um, it's an employee improvement program to just make sure that they get it right because you don't want um, things to keep going south that way. So the focus shouldn't be on identifying who the blame should go to, is to identify the problem, solve it, and train where you need to train, and then move forward from there. Anya, did you understand me, or
Thank you
not
so
really?
much. It's clear now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. Okay, Solomon, thanks for that. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My
Hello.
question is, as a team lead, what do I do when I notice signs of anxiety or depression in myself or any of my colleagues? What do I do?
Okay, so what do you do when you notice signs of depression in your colleague? Hello, Fatima.
Yes, yes, please.
All right. Okay. All right. So when you see signs of depression, generally for people that are depressed, you will expect that um, they become uh, their performance drop generally. So they lose interest in the things they used to do. If you know them very well, even outside work, you expect that you know that this person likes going out, hanging out, and all of that. Eventually, start becoming quite reserved, and I don't want to do that again. Or you know that this person is a high performer, and they usually reverts with feedbacks or resolves tasks you give them, handles tasks you give them within a very short period of time. But suddenly you start noticing that this same person that can give you give you feedbacks immediately within 24 hours or less, it now takes probably spends from 2 hours to 1 week before giving the same feedback of equal capacity or size or whatever. So that would suggest that this individual is losing interest to a large extent. And there are many other things that could also suggest mood or depression. Some of them can be quite irritable. Um, so not to drag that so much, but when you notice a bit of that, it's important. Uh, First, everyone that is depressed need help. I would like to start with that. Everyone that is depressed and you've identified as truly depressed need help. And if you're going to be offering that help, you have to make them believe you're coming to help. I would like to stress that um, you lose it completely or even worsen the situation if they find out that you're not the kind of person they can trust, but it's probably because they're desperate to just pick up and they've told you um, these are their problems, and eventually hear it somewhere else where uh, you are probably the only person they've told about it, it could hurt and can actually worsen them. So if you're not ready to play that role and keep it to yourself alone and seek out ways of solving it, then don't go in the first place. That's just um, from my experience. So if you now want to help, you have to engage the person, ask for one-on-one, and find out what the problem is. Probably take them to a probably quiet place. It's not something you do in a meeting, general meeting, and say, "Are you fine? I noticed this. I noticed that." No, you don't have to do it that way. You could just tell them, "Okay," or even after a meeting, probably you just walk up to them and tell them, "I want to have a word with you." It won't even look like this is probably what you're going to talk about, and you take them to a private place and you tell them, I've noticed this and I'm concerned about you. I'm worried that your performance seems to be dropping and I can't see anything that appears to be affecting it directly here. Your walkthroughs are okay, everything is okay. So what exactly is affecting you? You understand that I really need to help you, and trust me, it will not affect work. If you want me to even request to give you leave, allow you to go on leave or something, I'm willing to do it. Just to give them this sense of um, make them feel comfortable with you, and that's the only time they open up. And when they open up, it may not be work related thing. It may be actually family related or something. You give advice within what you can handle, or find another person that can help within the office or elsewhere, and make sure it's still kept private, and follow through to make sure they're getting better, and gradually walk them up the ladder on the activity. So don't load them up with a lot of work. Probably may start reducing a little of what they do, so that over time you keep adding and adding gradually. As they improve, you add until you get them back to speed with what they used to do before. So I think there's just a few of the guide I have in mind. Fatima, hope you're okay with this. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh wow. So hunger and mental health are not direct correlates. Adele is already laughing at you guys. But again, see, yes, so if someone is hungry, you'll expect them to be quite irritable. If it affects, yes, it would affect their blood sugar level, then it can get beyond that. So you see that their level of concentration has dropped, their effectiveness, efficiency would significantly also drop. So with all of that, even when it is not mental health, it's just it. They should get back and feel better and be okay completely. But it is absolutely has nothing with to do with mental ill health. Just that availability of sugar to your brain affects your performance as well, our performance generally. And the few things I mentioned are a few of the signs and things around you it can impact. But simply solve it by just telling someone to go and eat, or you go eat yourself. And when you stand with, but again, I don't see why you will allow that happen in the first place. You should always give yourself the opportunity to not miss your meals. Eat when you should eat, and if you need to take something in between to keep your blood sugar okay, especially where medically you are okay to take that, then go ahead and do it. Don't get hungry and allow yourself to get to that point. Let me tell you a funny story um, of what this thing also made me do sometime in medical school. I I graduated from my school. I left school as our school week, so I did a lot of NIMSA games those days too. And a particular day, we just came back from lecture after a very stressful day, and was supposed to run a match. And I was going to keep the goals. I hadn't eaten all day because of a whole lot of activities. I can't remember all the things that happened that day, but I know it was quite very busy. I I I unfortunately I lost two goals that day because I couldn't even judge the distance between myself, my hand and the ball. So I thought I had dived, and when I dived, and I wouldn't dive far enough because I felt the ball was just close by. But I couldn't touch it still, and those things rolled into my net. It happened two times, and it can happen, and it's just hunger, not mental health. So it can happen. Just make sure you're okay. It may be a funny thing to say, but of course that's the way it plays out.
I'm completely with you. One of the first things I wear my teams is you have to feed me. Like don't take me out on the field and expect I'm going to go all
Okay.
day. I need food and I
Exactly.
need food on a regular basis. So I know myself
Exactly.
and I put that out there. There's no shame. I what I'm on a serious note, what I'm hearing from you, Aina, is that
Yeah.
you know yes, there's responsibility that we have for ourselves to take care of ourselves, but I think that even more importantly for us to hear today is that we have a responsibility and accountability for the people around us, and we
Yes,
have
we
to
do.
be much more intentional about listening, about observing, about asking questions, probing, and being open, and making sure that people understand that we're open to
Yes.
whenever they need a listening ear, and a non-judgmental, very
Yeah.
key listening ear. So that's my own takeaway for today.
I'm happy you did a good summary on that, and I totally agree with your summary on that. Thank you.
Solomon, if, if we could also give Enyinna a chance to mention what Hygeia also can offer startups and SMEs from a health perspective.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm happy she gave me that opportunity. So I work with Hygeia HMO with the very first health insurance company in Nigeria with over 36 years to our belt. So we're quite experienced and good at what we do. Um, so generally, we offer health insurance services to families, in groups, corporate organizations, and we have embraced a lot of technology in doing what we do that at the point of care, you can always bet that Hygeia will deliver for you. And we have very interesting packages you can rely on for the rainy day to make sure that you have access to care when you need it. And we're good at also coordinating care and even in emergency. So I can mention a wide array of what we do. And trust me, they are all for your benefits. So you can reach out to any one of us. Um, I'm on LinkedIn already. You can send a private a message that you're interested in our health insurance packages, and I can get straight to you and we discuss more. Make sure you have something good for yourself, your company, or even your family. And we of course have things for our senior colleagues, the elderly ones. Thank you so much for that. Hi, Suleiman. Hello.
I'm still here, Nina. So thank you for that. Thank you for also the words that you've given us today. I know I learned a lot. I was here scribbling in my notebook, so I was listening very very closely because I'm very aware of my responsibility also as an advisor to make sure that I'm there for those folks, the founders and CEOs who really just need that shoulder to cry on sometimes. Solomon, back to you.
What do you say exactly? I'm not sure I got that clearly. All right. So for the list plans, we have our high starter plan. So the amount is just about 50 something thousand for an individual, and it can serve between 5 to 20 lives. That's for corporate organizations. So those are just our SMEs too. So, but for bigger ones, we have something. We have quite a range we can share with them. That we can serve them too. Hello. Very. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.